have been disrespected before, and you felt the tremor move through your chest like a quiet earthquake, a hidden collapse that nobody saw but you. Someone laughed when you spoke. Someone cut you off with a smirk. Someone reduced your worth to a careless shrug, and a small abyss opened inside you where rage, shame, and a cold silence began to gather. You tried to explain yourself. You tried to fight the narrative with more words, more smiles, more effort. But the more you tried, the more the shadow grew. The more you reached for your dignity, the further it slipped, as if your hands were wet with fear. There is a reason for this. When you meet disrespect with noise, you feed the spectacle. When you meet it with need, you announce weakness. And in a world that often confuses kindness with fragility, weakness becomes an invitation. Machiavelli would tell you that respect is not requested, it is engineered. It is not defended in the arena of words alone, but in the quiet calculus of consequence, appearance, and control. He is not asking you to become cruel, he is asking you to become sovereign. Because disrespect is not only an insult, it is a test. It asks whether your center is unshakable, whether your silence is strategy or surrender, whether your patience is generosity or fear. Most people rush to answer this test with volume. Machiavelli answers it with design. Begin here. Disrespect is rarely about you, it is about position. In any group, visible or hidden, hierarchies form. Some fight for status by pushing others down. Some protect their insecurity by striking first. Some test the edges of people the way a knife tests the softness of fruit. When you meet these moves with outrage, you reveal your dependence on their judgment. When you scramble to correct them, you accept their frame. In that instant, you move from author to respondent, from center to orbit. Machiavelli is merciless with this truth. Whoever defines the frame defines the outcome. So your first move is to stop fighting inside the frame they built and build a new one in which your presence becomes the reference point. You do this with silence that is not empty, but charged. When someone disrespects you publicly, your nervous system screams to answer immediately. But immediate answers are raw. Raw answers leak power. Instead, you pause long enough for the room to feel the weight of what just happened. That pause is not weakness. It is a small throne. It signals that you are not dragged into the mud by every provocation, that you are not a servant to their bait. Machiavelli prized the discipline of timing. He knew that a well-timed response changes memory. People will not remember the insult. They will remember what your stillness did to the room. If your silence tightens the air, if your gaze remains steady, if your posture does not collapse, you have already begun to reverse the current. Next, understand appearances. Machiavelli taught that rulers must learn how not to be good in the naive sense, and instead appear reliably, predictably, worthy of consequence. In private character, cultivate virtue. In public theater, display clarity. You do not need to prove you are kind, you must prove you are costly to mistreat. That does not mean threats, it means reputation. People learn through observation which doors are locked. Your door becomes locked when your boundaries are consistent, your words are sparse, and your follow-through is unquestionable. Most people collapse because they say, "Don't do that," and then tolerate it 3 more times. Each tolerance is an advertisement that your no is a prop. Machiavelli would call that a small negligence that breeds larger insolence. A single exception today becomes a custom tomorrow. This is where the darkest way to handle disrespect begins, not with revenge, not with theatrics, but with the cold removal of optionality. You decide what behavior will never pass, and you remove access the moment it appears. You do it without shaking, without screaming, without apology. If a colleague discredits you in a meeting, you reclaim the point with precise facts and neutral tone, then end the exchange by shifting the agenda without returning to them. Later, you move your collaboration to channels where your work cannot be casually undermined. If a friend mocks your private truth in public, you do not debate sincerity. You stop sharing private truths with them. If a partner uses contempt as oxygen, you do not attempt to resuscitate empathy with lectures. You leave the room, you leave the cycle. If needed, you leave the relationship, quietly, cleanly, finally. This is not cruelty, this is governance. Machiavelli's line about injuries, make them such that you need not fear revenge, has been misread by those who crave violence and misunderstood by those who fear power. Its essence is psychological, decisive, unmistakable outcomes end cycles. Half measures invite retaliation. Petty sparring prolongs the duel. When a boundary is broken, the response must be so clear and so complete that the other person's cost-benefit calculation changes for the foreseeable future. You are not punishing. You are educating incentives. Courts do this with sentences. Markets do this with price. Humans do this with consequence. When the cost of disrespect so far exceeds the thrill, disrespect expires on its own. Yet you are not an island. You live among eyes, and eyes carry stories. Machiavelli insists that a leader must guard reputation as one guards a fortress, for it is reputation that prevents unnecessary wars. What is the reputation you should seek? Not nice, not agreeable, not always available. Seek the reputation of inevitability. The person whose no is a final flaw. The person whose time is not a public park. The person whose attention must be earned by alignment, not extracted by noise. When people sense that about you, the petty choose other targets. The worthy step forward carefully, with respect. That is how you curate a court without announcing one. There is a trap waiting for you on this path. It is the trap of ego, the addictive sweetness of humiliation. You will be tempted to serve the scene, to craft a line so sharp that the room laughs, to choreograph a spectacle that leaves your opponent small. Machiavelli would caution you, the spectacle feeds the crowd, and crowds do not stay loyal. They demand new shows. If your power depends on roaring approval, you will be forced to roar and roar and roar again until your throat bleeds. Do not trade sovereignty for applause. The darkest way is quieter. You do not humiliate. You rearrange the board. You remove pieces that no longer belong in the game. You focus on outcomes that last longer than the echo of a laugh. Now we must confront the question of forgiveness, because your conscience will whisper it on sleepless nights. Machiavelli is not anti-forgiveness, he is anti-amnesia. You may forgive the person in your heart, but you must not forget the pattern with your mind. If someone shows you that your dignity is their playground, they have given you information. Use it, restructure access, adjust the weight of your trust, replace proximity with distance, openness with measured disclosure, joint ventures with clear contracts. This is not paranoia, it is memory put to work. The prince who forgets the last coup raises the next one in his courtyard. Consider the anatomy of a day where you embody this philosophy. You wake without the tightness of yesterday's argument because you did not carry it into the night. You told the truth once, delivered the consequence once, and now the ledger is closed. You walk into rooms with a slow breath that expands your ribcage, your chin even, your gaze calm. You are not scanning for insults because you are not addicted to being seen. You do not audition, you inhabit. You listen as if time belongs to you, because it does. When someone tries a small cut, you do not jump to cauterize it with a lecture. You mark it, you return to the mission of the room. Later, you move that person from inner circle to outer orbit, and the reclassification is permanent. You do not announce it, you live it, and your life steadily organizes itself around those who treat you as you demand to be treated. You will ask, what of mercy? Where does compassion live in Machiavelli's city? It lives in restraint. It lives in the choice to respond with design instead of destruction, with removal instead of ruin, with internal composure instead of external spectacle. The darkest way is not to become what wounded you. It is to deny the wound access to your governance. Mercy without boundaries is self-neglect. Boundaries without mercy are tyranny. You aim for a third position, principled resolve. You do not break people. You end patterns. You do not crush souls. You close doors. You do not poison wells. You build aqueducts that bypass them. There are tactics, and you must know them. The first is strategic ambiguity. You do not telegraph every intention. The person who disrespects you should never know whether you will address it now or later, here or elsewhere, directly or indirectly. This keeps them from gaming your rhythm. Ambiguity is not manipulation for its own sake. It is the refusal to let the offender set the tempo. Machiavelli admired rulers who concealed their counsel, not because they had nothing to say, but because time reveals more than talk. The second tactic is leverage through standards. Standards are pre-published consequences. If you interrupt me twice, I will end the meeting and reschedule without you. If my private life becomes a joke, the conversation ends. If deliverables are not met twice, our contract terminates. When standards exist, enforcement becomes impersonal. You are not angry. You are simply turning the page you wrote before the moment arose. The third tactic is control of terrain. Choose arenas where your strengths are amplified and your opponent's habits are cornered. If someone thrives on public spectacle, move to written records. If they manipulate with charm, add witnesses. If they snipe in groups, meet one-to-one, or refuse the forum entirely. Terrain is destiny. Your body must also be governed. Disrespect is not only intellectual, it is physiological. The pulse spikes, the mouth dries, the face burns. If your body belongs to the provocation, your mind will follow it. Train the signal. Inhale slowly through the nose for a count that feels luxurious. Exhale longer than you inhale. Drop the tongue from the roof of the mouth. Widen your peripheral vision. All of this is a message to the ancient animal inside you that the tiger is not here. The room changes when your blood slows. People feel it. They cannot name it, but they adjust. Machiavelli would tell you that power often arrives 2 minutes before the words. The body speaks a heraldic language. Learn it. There will be times when the offender is powerful, when open confrontation would be folly. Here, Machiavelli's counsel sharpens. Do not wage a war you cannot win. Bend the branch so it does not break you. Your move is subtle reallocation. Reduce exposure. Reassign dependencies. Accumulate allies through reliability and competence. Fortify your value until it becomes expensive to target you. When your usefulness to the system exceeds their appetite for mischief, mischief declines. If it does not, you prepare an exit that increases your autonomy. Detachment is sometimes the only response that ends the game. The darkest way is not to annihilate the player, it is to deny them the board. Now consider the ethics, because you are not a cardboard prince, and your life is not a chessboard alone. The point is not to harden into suspicion. The point is to refine your generosity through judgment. You will still choose grace. You will still choose to overlook small clumsiness, to forgive awkward words, to see the human behind the habit. But you will not confuse endless empathy with strategic wisdom. You can carry compassion in your heart and steel in your spine. Machiavelli, so often accused of coldness, understood human nature too well to indulge in fantasies about it. This is not about believing the worst. It is about preparing for it without becoming it. You may feel grief as you adopt this stance, grief that certain people cannot stay where you hoped they would, grief that innocence must be retired, grief that the world is not as safe as your younger self needed it to be. Allow that grief. It softens the blade. It keeps your power from becoming a mask for bitterness. The darkest way to handle disrespect is only dark because it asks you to take responsibility for the atmosphere around you. Responsibility is heavy, but it is the only weight that makes you strong. Without it, you are tossed by the disrespect of anyone who decides to test you on a bored afternoon. With it, you become something rarer than loved or feared. You become inevitable. Let us descend from theory into scenes. You're in a meeting. Someone takes credit for your work in a single, tidy sentence designed to make you invisible. The easy response is to sputter with offended pride or to make a joke that signals hurt but preserves the peace. The Machiavellian response is neither. You wait for the breath most people skip. Then you say, to clarify the timeline, the draft originated in my March brief. The data modeling is mine. The final polish is shared. The next phase is my lead. Facts, not fury. Then you place a marker for the room. The next phase is yours. Later, in writing, you circulate a summary that encodes ownership without sarcasm. The boundary is not loud, it is laminated. Respect adjusts. Or you are at a dinner, and a friend tells a story that exposes a private scar you entrusted to them. Laughter swells. The wound flashes open. The childish move is to wound back. The timid move is to swallow. The Machiavellian move is to let the laughter spend itself while your face remains composed. Then redirect the conversation to a topic that moves the table's status currency away from gossip and towards something you can lead. You do not rescue the friend from the awkwardness of their choice. You do not feed the scene with your pain. After dinner, you do not deliver a sermon. You deliver a decision. The vault is closed. They will feel the temperature change. That is the lesson. That is the consequence. Or you are in love, and contempt begins to lace the tone. Small sneers, rolling eyes, the slow alchemy that turns lovers into opponents. Do not barter for tenderness with a stack of speeches. Contempt is not cured by poetry. It is cured, if at all, by the shock of distance. You say, with no tremble, we do not speak to each other this way. If this returns, I will not remain in the room. If it becomes a pattern, I will not remain in the relationship. Then you do exactly as promised, once. The first time you leave, you do it with your keys, not your accusations. If the pattern returns, you end it without negotiating your personhood at a clearance price. Machiavelli would call that an injury decisive enough to end the cycle, not to harm the other, but to prevent the long, slow murder of your dignity. A final word about allies. Power isolated grows brittle. Machiavelli praised the prince who cultivated capable friends, not flatterers. In your life, this means choosing proximity to those who practice mutual elevation, people who correct you in private and defend you in public, people whose ambition contains room for yours, people who treat boundaries as bridges, not as fences to climb. With such people near, disrespect finds fewer angles of entry. You are harder to trivialize when those around you refuse to participate in trivializing you. You do not need many. 3 is a court. 2 is a shield. 1 is a beginning. If all of this feels severe, remember what the softer path has cost you. The weeks of rumination after a single slight, the way your spine curved for months under a comment you pretended to shrug off, the way you trained people to treat you by tolerating what you hated. Severity aimed at yourself. Discipline, clarity, enforcement saves you from cruelty aimed at you. You are not choosing darkness. You are removing dimness, the half-light where disrespect thrives. In full light, patterns become unmistakable, and your responses become simple. You do not need to explain your worth to anyone who is committed to not seeing it. You simply make it expensive to ignore. Now you stand in a different posture. Your voice is not louder, but it carries farther. Your calendar is not emptier, but it is cleaner. Your circle is not larger, but it is loyal. You do not call yourself unshakable. You move as if you are. And the world, which is always listening for how people name themselves through action, begins to adjust the way it speaks your name. That is respect, earned not through theatrics, but through architecture. In the next part, I will take you even deeper into the machinery behind these moves, how to read hidden motives with Machiavellian clarity, how to use appearances without losing integrity, and how to make your silence do the work of 1,000 speeches, so that when disrespect approaches again, it finds not a stage to perform on, but a wall it cannot scale. Disrespect is never just a word. It is a declaration of hierarchy. When someone disrespects you, they are not merely expressing emotion, they are testing the architecture of your power. To Machiavelli, such moments are the truest mirror of political life. Whether in a palace or in the smallest corner of society, they reveal who commands, who submits, and who understands that appearances rule the world more than intentions ever will. He warned, "Never allow yourself to be treated with contempt, not because of wounded pride, but because contempt erodes authority faster than betrayal. A ruler who is loved but not feared is vulnerable. A man or woman who tolerates mockery without strategic response teaches the world how to treat them." The first lesson, therefore, is to treat disrespect not as offense, but as data, a signal about who sees themselves above you, who wishes to rise through your fall, and who mistakes your patience for weakness. The untrained react emotionally. They defend themselves. They plead for understanding. They believe justice exists in the eyes of others. But Machiavelli knew that justice, as most imagine it, is a fiction maintained by power. When you are disrespected, you are not in a courtroom. You are on a battlefield of perception, and on this battlefield, explanation is submission. You must instead move with deliberate slowness, like a predator that has already decided its course. Every insult, every dismissal, every public slight becomes raw material for strategic theater. Machiavelli would tell you, never correct the one who disrespects you. Observe them, let them speak. They are revealing their level of understanding and their limits. The weak expose themselves through arrogance. They cannot hide their hunger for validation. By allowing them to speak freely, you give them enough rope to bind themselves. In The Prince, Machiavelli described how rulers lose control, not through cruelty, but through inconsistency. A prince who cannot master the appearance of calm after insult soon appears unstable. Therefore, your power begins in restraint. The ability to remain silent when provoked is not passive, it is the highest form of command. Silence creates uncertainty. Uncertainty breeds fear. And fear, properly directed, maintains order. But silence must not be confused with indifference. True Machiavellian silence is charged. It communicates calculation. You are not ignoring the insult, you are studying it, engraving it into the map of human weakness that guides your actions. Behind your stillness lies a promise. When the response comes, it will not be emotional, it will be surgical. Disrespect exposes the fragile egos of others. Most people crave attention, not truth. They insult you because they seek a reaction, any proof that they matter. The moment you react in anger, you confirm their relevance. The moment you respond in calm authority, you erase them from the stage. Machiavelli understood this dynamic centuries before modern psychology named it. Power depends on narrative, and narrative belongs to the one who controls interpretation. He wrote that men must be either caressed or annihilated. In other words, there is no middle ground in dealing with threats. If a person's disrespect poses no real danger to your influence, dismiss it quietly, as though swatting away dust. But if it threatens to undermine your standing, you must respond so decisively that no one dares repeat it. Mercy in such moments is weakness disguised as virtue. This principle is not cruelty, it is structure. Human society organizes itself through dominance and submission, through the balance of fear and admiration. Disrespect breaks that balance. To restore it, you must reassert hierarchy, not through begging for recognition, but by demonstrating that your value is untouchable. Consider how a lion maintains control of the savannah. It does not roar at every hyena that laughs in the distance. It waits until the laughter grows too close, then ends it with one strike. Your energy must be the same. Most provocations die on their own when ignored by an unmoved mind. But when you strike, strike to end, not to prove. Machiavelli taught that appearances are stronger than truth because people judge with their eyes, not with reason. Therefore, your external composure must never crack. A calm expression after humiliation is more frightening than rage. It suggests a power that cannot be disturbed, a person whose emotions are governed by their will. That is the posture of the ruler, not the subject. Still, there is a deeper layer beneath strategy, the internal discipline that keeps the heart from corrosion. Disrespect poisons only those who internalize it. The Machiavellian soul transforms insult into information. When someone mocks you, they show you what they fear. When someone betrays you, they expose what they value. Each act of disrespect is an X-ray of another person's weakness. Study it, catalog it, use it. Over time, you begin to see that the world is a stage of masks. The respectful may envy you, the flattering may resent you, the insolent often crave your recognition, the wise keep their distance and their respect quietly intact. Machiavelli would say that most people act not from morality, but from necessity. They respect you when it costs them nothing, and disrespect you when they believe you cannot retaliate. Your task, then, is to make disrespect costly. Costly not through violence, but through consequence. Withdraw your access, your information, your attention. To the manipulative, attention is currency. To the proud, your approval is oxygen. Deprive them of both. They will suffocate on their own vanity. This, Machiavelli would argue, is the hidden art of power. To command without shouting, to punish without moving, to make others correct themselves without your direct involvement. When you master this, you cease to chase respect. It orbits you naturally, sustained by the gravitational field of your self-control. He understood that love makes men dependent, but fear keeps them obedient. Yet the modern mind must reinterpret fear not as terror, but as awe. The recognition of strength too solid to challenge. When you radiate calm dominance, even your silence speaks. Never announce revenge. To speak of revenge is to concede that you were wounded. Instead, orchestrate events so that the offender is undone by the consequences of their own arrogance. Machiavelli's genius lay in turning human nature against itself. The proud destroy themselves through overconfidence, the deceitful through contradiction. All you need to do is remain still and let time expose them. But make no mistake, this restraint demands immense control. The impulse to defend one's honor is ancient. It burns in the blood. To master it is to master yourself. The disciplined mind separates emotion from execution. You feel the sting, but you act from clarity. You plan not for satisfaction, but for equilibrium. Many confuse forgiveness with weakness. Machiavelli would call this delusion. Forgiveness is useful only when it strengthens your image or buys you time. Otherwise, it is indulgence. He did not advocate cruelty for pleasure, but strategy for survival. And survival, in every era, belongs to those who understand that respect cannot be requested. It must be enforced through consequence, visible or invisible. Disrespect, when properly understood, becomes your teacher. It reveals who values truth and who worships appearance. It shows who understands balance and who lives in chaos. The more calmly you study it, the more you detach from the illusions that govern ordinary people. They live enslaved to emotion. You, guided by reason, become untouchable. And yet there is a paradox that Machiavelli never denied. Power without wisdom collapses into tyranny. If your response to disrespect becomes excessive, you become what you once opposed. Thus, your ultimate weapon is moderation, ruthless only when necessary, detached always. The ruler who punishes every offense loses credibility. The ruler who ignores every offense loses authority. True mastery lies in choosing the few moments that define perception and letting the rest dissolve in silence. This measured cruelty preserves peace. It teaches others to measure their tone, their proximity, their ambition around you. Not out of fear of your temper, but out of respect for your discernment. People learn quickly who is reactive and who is strategic. They test boundaries until they meet the one that does not move. Be that boundary. Even in personal life, the principle holds. The colleague who undermines you, the friend who mocks subtly, the family member who disguises control as concern, each one plays a role in your education. They remind you that power is not situational, it is internal. You command not by force, but by absence of need. The person who does not crave validation cannot be insulted. The one who governs their own esteem governs every interaction. Machiavelli would whisper, "Become the observer of men, not their mirror. Observe without attachment. See through motives as a hawk sees through mist." In doing so, you step outside the emotional economy of everyday life. You no longer trade reactions for approval. You operate from self-sufficiency, a kingdom within that no word can touch. The art of handling disrespect, then, is the art of invisible rule. When they insult you and you do not flinch, you create silence that echoes louder than protest. When they seek your anger and find serenity, they begin to doubt themselves. When they expect retaliation and find nothing but composure, they question their own power. This doubt is your throne. Sit upon it quietly. Those who disrespect you become unwilling servants of your narrative. Their gossip spreads your name. Their envy amplifies your presence. Their attempts to harm you build your myth. For the Machiavellian mind, even enemies are instruments. They advertise your existence to the world while believing they diminish it. Never waste energy trying to correct perception. Perception is the domain of the masses. Influence it indirectly, through symbols, gestures, and results. Do not explain your actions. Demonstrate them. Do not argue your value. Embody it. Each act of unshakable composure writes your reputation into the minds of others more powerfully than words ever could. As the Florentine master would conclude, the world belongs to those who appear most certain. When chaos rises and you remain unmoved, people instinctively align with your stability. They may never love you, but they will rely on you. And reliance is power disguised as trust. So when disrespect comes, and it will, do not shrink. Do not respond in haste. Study the scene. Understand the motive, calculate the cost, and choose the silence that unsettles. Behind that silence, plan the moment when balance will be restored, not through noise, but through inevitability. Machiavelli's law is timeless. The strong need not announce strength. They simply endure until the world adjusts to their gravity. Every empire collapses first in the mind of its ruler. The moment one begins to believe that respect is permanent, the decay has already begun. Disrespect rarely appears suddenly. It grows silently, like mold in the corners of loyalty. Machiavelli understood that control must be exercised long before it is challenged. The wise do not react to threats, they preempt them. They maintain such precision in perception that rebellion withers before it even dares to form. To master disrespect, you must learn to read it in its infancy. Those glances too long, those silences too loaded, those gestures too casual in your presence. The world communicates hierarchies through subtle cues, and the Machiavellian mind is fluent in this silent language. Before a word of defiance is spoken, its intention vibrates through the air. The naive see conversation. The strategist sees a pattern of power exchange. Most people believe that control is about domination. It is not. It is about timing. The greatest rulers never shout, never threaten. They anticipate. Their presence bends behavior. Their reputation does the work of 1,000 soldiers. Machiavelli wrote that it is better to appear strong than to be strong, because appearance governs the imagination, and imagination governs men. What they fear, they obey. This principle extends to every arena: your work, your relationships, your silence. If people sense that your emotional world is unguarded, they will test its walls. They will look for weaknesses, need for validation, hunger for approval, traces of vanity. They will exploit these gently, often without even realizing why. That is the nature of human instinct: to climb, to test, to push. When you master your presence, you remove their ladder. Machiavelli would call this psychological fortification. Just as a city builds high walls to prevent invasion, the ruler must build emotional fortresses, imperceptible but impenetrable. Do not reveal where your pride lives. Do not explain what offends you. Do not disclose what you love most. Every disclosure is a map, and the world is full of cartographers eager to draw the borders of your weakness. But fortification is not isolation. The brilliant strategist moves among others freely, cloaked not in armor, but in mastery of tone. When he speaks, his words are measured not to express, but to influence. When he listens, his silence becomes interrogation. Presence itself becomes a weapon. You must learn to wield ambiguity. The human mind cannot tolerate uncertainty. It seeks clarity, predictability, closure. By remaining unreadable, you compel others to reveal themselves. They fill the silence with their own fears and projections. They confess in an attempt to understand you, and in those confessions, you find control. The art of handling disrespect, therefore, is not reaction, but orchestration. You do not silence opposition by force. You redirect it. A rumor, when acknowledged, grows. When ignored, it dies of starvation. But when subtly redirected, it becomes propaganda. Machiavelli's genius was his understanding that influence thrives on perception management. Let others underestimate you until the moment it serves your design. Pretend to concede, and your enemy will sleep. Pretend to retreat, and you will be followed into the trap. Disrespect, in this sense, can be turned into bait. Allow the arrogant to reveal their impatience. Observe how quickly the loudest voices expose their insecurity. Every outburst against you is proof that you occupy space in their mind, rent-free. You need not destroy them. They destroy themselves in the pursuit of your reaction. To the Machiavellian, this is efficiency, the art of letting time and ego do the work of retribution. He knew that human beings are self-consuming creatures. The disrespectful seek validation through rebellion, but rebellion demands energy. When they find no opponent, they exhaust themselves. Your stillness becomes their defeat, but stillness alone is not enough. You must also command perception. The appearance of confidence must never falter. Even in defeat, look as if you allowed it. Even in isolation, seem self-contained. The crowd believes what it sees, not what it knows. If they see you unmoved, they will assume you are unbroken. Soon, they will begin to doubt the validity of every attack against you. That doubt is the seed of regained authority. Machiavelli would warn that those who rely on explanation have already lost. The more you justify yourself, the smaller you appear. The ruler who pleads for understanding signals that understanding can limit him. Better to remain misunderstood than diminished. Mystery frightens more deeply than confession ever could. Control also requires precision in punishment. Most people, when they strike back, do so chaotically. They lash out too soon or too late, weakening their impact. The Machiavellian approach demands calculation. Punish once, decisively, in a way that others remember longer than the offender suffers. The goal is not pain, it is memory. The purpose of discipline is not revenge, it is deterrence. You see this in nature. A storm does not announce its fury, it simply arrives and reshapes the landscape. When your response comes, it should be like that, swift, final, undeniable. The moment after, return to calm. The unpredictability of such composure creates awe. People fear not what they can anticipate, but what they cannot predict. However, one must avoid cruelty for its own sake. Machiavelli cautioned that unnecessary violence breeds resentment, and resentment breeds conspiracy. Precision ensures that power remains stable. To rule effectively, even in personal life, your measures must be both visible and reasonable. The world will forgive severity when it seems just, but never forgive humiliation. So when you act with authority, but not spectacle. The discreet move is often more powerful than the public strike. Those who humiliate their enemies in public create martyrs. Those who end them quietly create peace. The greatest victories are those whose architects remain unseen. At the heart of Machiavellian strategy lies the manipulation of perception through contrast. To appear generous, give after restraint. To appear merciful, forgive after the possibility of punishment is known. To appear invincible, expose only controlled vulnerability. Disrespect can therefore be turned into theater, a performance where you define the script, the timing, and the applause. The wise ruler shapes his legend through repetition of controlled gestures. Each time you handle disrespect with composure, you add another stone to the monument of your reputation. Reputation, Machiavelli said, is the fortress you build within the minds of others. It outlasts armies, speeches, and even truth. It becomes the myth that governs perception in your absence, but a fortress requires maintenance. The moment you neglect your public image, the vultures of gossip descend. You must curate your silence as carefully as your words. Silence without presence is weakness. Silence with reputation is dominance. Keep the world slightly hungry for your attention. Absence is valuable only when your return is desired. There is another, subtler layer to Machiavellian mastery, the management of your own emotion behind the mask. Even as you project calm, your internal world must not corrode with suppressed fury. The emotion must be transmuted, not buried. Use anger as information. Use pain as sharpening stone. Every insult that once burned can become clarity once observed without reaction. The self-governing mind is not numb, it is alchemical. It turns wounds into wisdom and humiliation into strategy. Disrespect no longer provokes you when you understand its roots. People insult what they cannot dominate. They belittle what they secretly admire but do not comprehend. When you are misunderstood, it is often proof that you have evolved beyond common comprehension. Machiavelli would remind you that originality always invites envy. To stand above the crowd is to invite stones from below. Therefore, view disrespect as evidence of ascension. The higher you rise, the more visible your back becomes to those who cannot climb. The noise behind you confirms your direction. The only true mistake is to turn around. When you stop responding to insult, you begin to experience a new form of freedom, the freedom of detachment. The opinions of others cease to dictate your state. In this autonomy, you begin to rule not just others, but yourself. Machiavelli's ultimate wisdom was this: control begins in the mirror. A prince who cannot govern his own impulses cannot govern a city. Likewise, a person who cannot govern their emotional reactions cannot command respect. To govern yourself is to master three things: your attention, your emotion, and your timing. Attention determines what deserves your energy. Emotion determines how you interpret experience. Timing determines when to act or remain still. Together, these form the triangle of personal power. When you perfect it, no disrespect can penetrate. At the highest level, disrespect becomes irrelevant. You transcend the petty theater of approval. People's words become predictable, their games transparent. You no longer need to play. This is where Machiavelli's philosophy merges with inner sovereignty. You no longer handle disrespect, you orchestrate perception. You no longer react, you define what reaction even means. In this silence, there is tremendous authority. People mistake it for mystery. They project greatness onto what they cannot decipher. You need not convince them otherwise. Let their imagination labor in your favor. Let their uncertainty build your myth. The Machiavellian mind never reveals its full clarity. To be entirely understood is to lose power. Therefore, always leave an unlit corner in your personality, a space for interpretation. People fear what they cannot fully define, and they respect what they fear. Even allies must remain slightly uncertain. Absolute familiarity breeds casualness, and casualness erodes hierarchy. Maintain warmth, but never exposure. Be friendly, but not open. Give just enough to inspire loyalty, never enough to inspire equality. Machiavelli knew that affection, when ungoverned, turns subordinates into rivals. The one who desires universal approval ends as a servant to perception. By now, you understand that the dark art of handling disrespect is not about others. It is about mastery of yourself and your stage. Disrespect is inevitable. Humiliation is optional. You decide whether an insult becomes a seed of chaos or a proof of control. When the next attempt at diminishing you appears, watch it unfold as if from a throne. The very act of not descending into conflict is the clearest statement of power you can make. Machiavelli might have smiled at the irony that true power often looks like serenity. The calm ruler is feared more than the furious one. The calm person commands more than the loudest voice. Disrespect feeds on emotion. Silence starves it. Your challenge now is not to suppress emotion, but to refine it into signal. Let the world think you are detached. In truth, you are precise. You see too clearly to waste movement. You understand too deeply to need explanation. Thus, when others disrespect you, it no longer offends, it reveals. When they underestimate you, it no longer diminishes, it empowers. When they conspire, it no longer threatens, it confirms your relevance. The Machiavellian mind has no enemies, only instruments. Every reaction from others becomes usable. Every failure becomes camouflage. Every silence becomes command. The world bends, not because you force it, but because you no longer resist it. And so you walk through life as the invisible sovereign, unbothered, unreadable, unshakable. There is a moment in every strategist's evolution when the game itself becomes transparent. You no longer count insults or plot responses. You see through the structure of human interaction as one sees through glass. Disrespect, once felt like fire, now appears as movement of air, irrelevant, almost absurd. This is the final stage of Machiavellian awareness. The art of governing reality through stillness. Machiavelli never worshipped control for its own sake. He studied it as a necessity of survival. He understood that chaos is the natural state of men, and that only those who project order can lead. When you reach this level, you no longer need to prove yourself. You become the silent axis around which lesser minds revolve. The secret is not to accumulate power, but to radiate inevitability. In this space, everything becomes symbolic. Your tone, your timing, even your absence. People begin to measure their words around you, not because you demanded respect, but because you mastered scarcity. Presence is valuable when it is rare. You must learn to disappear strategically, appear only when your impact will shift the narrative. Absence creates anticipation. Anticipation creates reverence. Machiavelli would remind you that the most efficient ruler rules from the shadows, through perception rather than decree. When you withhold your attention, people become aware of their dependency on it. They feel withdrawal, confusion, and eventually recognition of your value. The Machiavellian uses this psychology without cruelty. You do not punish through anger. You educate through absence. Your silence becomes a mirror in which others confront their own insignificance. At this height, respect is no longer an external prize. It becomes the natural consequence of your internal consistency. You no longer chase acknowledgement because you have mastered the one realm no one else can invade, your mind. This is the inner citadel of the strategist. From here, every insult echoes faintly, every provocation dissolves before it reaches you. You have become, as Machiavelli might say, a fortress built within yourself. Power now flows not from intimidation, but from predictability of strength. Those around you know that you will not react impulsively. They sense that your decisions are carved from deliberation. The fear you inspire is quiet, clean, almost sacred. It is not terror, it is awe. They realize that you see them too clearly to be deceived, and that realization disciplines them more effectively than punishment ever could. Yet there is danger here too. The final enemy of mastery is pride. Machiavelli warned that rulers fall when they begin to believe they are invincible. Arrogance blinds the strategist faster than emotion ever could. The remedy is perspective, the understanding that power is cyclical, not absolute. The seasons of influence turn like the seasons of nature. What you command today will one day belong to another. Accepting this impermanence keeps your mind sharp and your heart uncorrupted. Therefore, maintain humility, not as virtue, but as strategy. Pretend to need advice, even when your course is set. Allow others the illusion of contribution. Let them feel consulted, respected, part of your orbit. The Machiavellian leader never hoards credit. He distributes it to prevent envy. He lets others taste significance while he retains control of direction. This is how one governs hearts without revealing the hand that steers them. True strength, then, lies in modulation. Know when to be seen and when to fade, when to speak and when to remain inscrutable. The immature believe dominance means constant assertion. The wise know that power breathes, expansion and withdrawal, declaration and silence. Every gesture must serve balance. Too much visibility breeds familiarity. Too much secrecy breeds suspicion. Master the rhythm, and you will rule perception itself. At this level, manipulation becomes unnecessary. Your mere existence influences behavior. People adjust themselves in your presence because your energy dictates the atmosphere. They mirror your calm, your precision, your lack of emotional noise. Machiavelli would say, "The world becomes your reflection when you cease to react to it." Now, imagine an insult delivered to such a person. It lands, finds no purchase, and falls away. The offender, expecting confrontation, meets composure. Expecting outrage, meets understanding. Expecting weakness, meets indifference. Their confidence cracks. They begin to question their own motives. The psychological reversal is complete. The disrespectful become self-conscious. The observer remains unbothered. This is the quiet revenge of mastery. The Machiavellian mind uses every interaction as calibration. You study tone, motive, rhythm of speech. You detect insecurity as easily as scent. With time, you develop a sixth sense, the ability to predict betrayal before it forms. You prevent it not with confrontation but with management of opportunity. Betrayal needs conditions, privacy, resentment, and hope of gain. Remove anyone, and it dies unborn. You remove privacy by transparency. Show what you want them to see. You remove resentment by measured praise. Feed ego without losing authority. You remove hope by limiting access. They cannot overthrow what they cannot touch. In this way, your peace is maintained not by suppression, but by design. When disrespect becomes impossible, you will notice another phenomenon: isolation. Few will dare approach without caution. The air around you thickens with reverence and distance. Do not mistake this for loneliness. It is the natural solitude of command. Machiavelli wrote that a prince must learn to live apart, even among people. Intimacy is luxury, not necessity. Grant it sparingly. If solitude grows heavy, remember, it is the tax of influence. Great minds converse inwardly. They draw strength from the quiet spaces where ordinary men fear to dwell. In solitude, reflection sharpens intention. You begin to see patterns invisible to those distracted by emotion. Every insult ever spoken against you becomes material for philosophy. Every betrayal becomes a footnote in your education. The past ceases to wound. It instructs. At this height, forgiveness changes meaning. You forgive not out of virtue, but out of indifference. The act of letting go becomes effortless because you no longer depend on the offender's understanding. They are irrelevant to your continuity. Machiavelli would call this enlightened pragmatism, not mercy, but efficiency. To waste thought on resentment is to fund your enemy's relevance. Withdraw investment, and they vanish. Here, discipline evolves into elegance. No wasted gestures, no unnecessary words. You begin to embody the very principles you once studied. Calm becomes your default, precision your language, patience your weapon. When others scramble to react, you remain the unmoved center. Time bends toward you because you no longer chase it, and yet power at this altitude carries responsibility. Influence, even silent, shapes those who orbit you. People look to the composed for guidance, to the fearless for stability. They imitate what they observe. Therefore, conduct becomes legacy. You teach through demonstration. Your restraint becomes contagious. Your precision becomes model. The Machiavellian, who understands this, transitions from manipulator to architect of order. This is the paradox few recognize. The darker your understanding of human nature, the brighter your influence can become. By acknowledging cruelty, you transcend it. By mastering manipulation, you outgrow the need for it. By embracing shadow, you restore balance to your world. Machiavelli never urged men to be monsters, he urged them to be awake. Awareness is the final throne. When you see the machinery behind flattery, the insecurity behind aggression, the desperation behind arrogance, compassion naturally arises. Not sentimental compassion, but lucid empathy. You no longer despise the disrespectful. You understand their blindness. They act from fear, from lack of self-command. And in that understanding, your superiority becomes quiet. You need no victory. You already possess perspective. In this serenity, the strategist evolves into the sage. He governs not by pressure, but by example. His presence brings structure wherever he stands. People feel safer near him without knowing why. They sense that his emotions do not leak, his energy does not waver, his boundaries are invisible yet unbreakable. This is the aura of mastery. And so the journey concludes where it began, in the recognition that every insult is merely a test of self-control. Those who fail become subjects to chaos. Those who pass become authors of destiny. You have learned to see disrespect as signal, silence as strength, patience as strategy. You have learned that the darkest way to handle disrespect is not vengeance, it is evolution. Machiavelli's ghost would approve. He would remind you that history remembers not the loudest, but the most disciplined. The truly powerful rarely announce their dominance. They allow the world to interpret it. You are no longer the offended. You are the mirror in which the world measures its composure. So when the next challenge arises, a word, a gesture, a subtle slight, remember this moment. Breathe, observe, choose stillness over reaction. Each second of calm is a declaration. You cannot move me. That is the purest power of all. Now, leave the field with quiet pride. The war is not outside you. It is over. You have won because nothing outside yourself can command your state again. And to every listener who has followed this path to the end, understand, this knowledge is not meant to make you cruel, but unshakable. The calm that comes from comprehension is the only armor worth wearing. You have seen through illusion. You have mastered response. You have reclaimed your energy. Write in the comments, I choose composure. And if this message has reminded you of the strength already within, subscribe for more lessons in power, psychology, and self-command. Your evolution has only begun.